All right, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our April Data Working Group meeting for today. I'm very excited to be joining you all for this. I think it's about our seventh Data Working Group meeting of the year. We're going to do things a little bit differently with today's Data Working Group. We've got a bunch of different activities and conversations to have around data culture. So what I'm going to quickly do is just drop a link in the chat. And I encourage all of you to join me at the link. This is going to take us to the PowerPoint presentation and the activities that we're going to be doing today. But I'm also going to go ahead and just share my screen real quickly so we're all looking at the same stuff. So feel free also to join the PowerPoint at the link that is dropped in the chat, as there will be opportunities to do that work that's in the PowerPoint. Well, as I said, our focus today here in April is really tips for building a data culture at your school. We're going to be doing a couple different activities and engaging with this question of what does it mean to have a data culture at your school? What are the activities and what are the thought processes that should go into building a robust data culture? So as far as an agenda for today, we're going to start with a quick introduction and bell ringer. We're in that section right now. And then we're going to have some opportunity for schools and school personnel on the call to do a self-assessment. This will be done individually, but we're going to use some resources from the Great Schools Partnership to do a quick self-assessment of where our school is in terms of our own data culture. This will lead into a brief conversation around tips that build a strong data culture before we have an opportunity to break you guys into some small groups to share some tactics and techniques that you've used all along to help improve and strengthen the data culture at your schools. It's also a great opportunity to learn some new tips and tricks if that's something that you're looking for and desirous for. So we've got a lot of opportunities to engage around this question. And so with that being said, just a few logistical pieces around today. If you could just take a few moments to arrange your screen so you can see both Zoom and Google. What we want you to be able to do is continue to see the presentation through Zoom, but also interact with the slides themselves in this Google presentation. We're going to be using a combination of Google Slides and Jamboard today. So if there's a way that you can arrange your screen to fit your windows, that you can see both what's on the presentation as well as the PowerPoint, feel free to go ahead and do that. Additionally, a few other expectations for today. We have tried to bring a little bit more engagement into these working group meetings to make them feel more like a working group. So some expectations for today, please feel free to participate to the best of your ability and contribute to this learning environment where it's safe not to know. There'll be opportunities to use the chat features. There'll be opportunities to come off mute when you're in small group sections. So we just want you to feel comfortable participating. I know that there may be a lot going on at your school today, and so it's perfectly fine to have to address those issues first. But if you have the ability to participate, we really welcome the shared learnings that this group can bring. With that being said, what is learned here leaves here. We hope that there will be some tips and techniques that you can take back into your schools after conversing with fellow data managers and data-informed people around the state. As I said, this is a working group and we want people to take the time to connect with their colleagues. So we will have opportunities for some small group discussion in this session. And then lastly, if you can be on camera, encourage it just when you're especially in that small group session to encourage interactivity in the small group sessions. You have to be on sort of a blank camera or stop your video. That's perfectly fine. We recognize that different contexts require different things. And please stay on mute if you're not talking. But if you do have a comment, a question, want to add, feel free to jump off mute or add something to the chat as we go. All right, so we're going to begin real quickly with a quick bell ringer. So if you have access to the PowerPoint, you can join me on slide 5. So feel free to join me on slide 5 here. And what we'll do is just take a minute or two for those of you who have access to the PowerPoint. I'll drop that once again in the chat. If you can go ahead and fill these sticky notes, so basically just double click and you can type in here some thoughts on what does it mean in your mind to have a data-driven culture at your school? What words or what ideas or what practices you typically associate with having a data-driven culture at your school? So feel free if you can access the PowerPoint. Once again, I'm going to drop that in the chat. And we'll take a few moments on slide 5 of the PowerPoint. Feel free to drop in and add your thoughts on this response to this question. We'll take a couple moments and feel free to do that live. Thank you for letting me know that access is set to view only. I'm going to go ahead and change that up real quickly so that people have editor access.
I have changed it, Mike.
Thank you so much, Kevin. So feel free, once again, on slide 5, we'll give it just a moment or two. Join me and feel free to click into one of these tabs. Feel free to answer or provide your responses to this question. Thank you so much, Ryan, for letting us know about that. Wonderful. Got some people starting to write into the post-it notes we have here on the screen. Feel free to add your own comments as we go on. Plenty of room for additional bell ringer participation. Right, great. Some response. We've got being intentional. Decisions by teachers and leaders are based on collected data. Staff regularly uses data to inform their practice. Discussions are being held. Terrific. Use of benchmark data. Benchmarks extremely important in making comparisons and marking progress. Data is not viewed as personal, but it is shared. That's great. Sort of destigmatizing data in a way. It's about collective and shared responsibility. I'm going to give it just about 30 more seconds for people to respond. We'll have plenty of opportunity to discuss this further, but this is really just to jog our minds and get ourselves thinking about this idea of data-driven culture. All right, awesome. Feel free to continue to jot down for a few more moments. We'll return to some of this as we go into our small group discussion and our debrief at the end. But now we're going to take an opportunity to work on some of this data culture questions a little bit individually. So I'm going to move on to slide 6. So if you are ready to move on to slide 6, feel free to go ahead and do that. So we're going to take a few moments here to do some self-reflection on our schools. You can go ahead and download the document that's at this link, or at least click on it. This links to the data-informed self-assessment worksheet. This is from the Great Schools Partnership, or it's been adapted from the Great Schools Partnership. And so we're going to take about 5 minutes now to complete this survey. And I'm going to go ahead and open a poll which has the questions from the survey. So you can have the survey out in the Word doc, but please respond to the survey in the poll because we want to aggregate people's responses to this. This is all anonymous. You don't need to worry about saying things about your school that might cast in a bad light. It's all anonymous. But we want to get some feedback and some thoughts on some of the things that are in this data form self-assessment survey. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. Please take a couple minutes. I'll give about 5 minutes now for people on the call, if you'd like, to jump in and complete this survey. We'll take a look at the results together in about 5 minutes. Go ahead, VJ. I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, how can I get in? I can't access the worksheet.
Okay, I'm going to try and change the sharing settings on that real quickly. If not, the poll has the same questions, so you can answer them from the poll.
Thank you.
If you click on the link on slide 6, you should have access to the Word doc with the questions. But once again, you can also just directly answer them through the poll.
Okay, thanks.
I will take until about 10:14. If you're having any issues answering the questions on the poll, please let me know. But please take your time to respond if you can. Wonderful. I'm starting to see answers cascade in. As I said, we'll take about 2 more minutes on this just so people have the opportunity to respond. We have questions here both on sort of the level to which you do certain things with data and how much you agree that your school is doing certain things. So please try to respond to both sets of questions. All right, we'll take one more minute. Thank you all who have answered. We've got about half of the participants on the call who've responded to the survey questions. So we'll try and pick that up a little bit more, be representative. I know some of you are maybe not in schools, but maybe you're in an organization that uses data in an educational capacity. Feel free to respond to the best of your ability if you're thinking about these questions. We'll do a 20-second warning. Any last-minute responses that people want to throw in to the survey, feel free to do that now. And then I'll go ahead and release the data so we can take a look at some of this. This is pretty interesting what we're seeing here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. We've got about over 60% of the people on the call who responded. I'm going to go ahead and share the results. And I'm going to give just a few moments for people to review the results of the poll. If you cannot see the poll results, please let me know. But just take a moment. Feel free to peruse the results, take a look at some of the answers. We've got some interesting modal responses on some of these, majority responses on some of these. Definitely, use of data is a common feature in a lot of schools. We're seeing, at least for these first couple questions, sometimes, often, rarely, always, nobody is very much never on any of these things, which is great. So something is happening, but there's definitely, obviously, room for growth. I'm looking, for instance, at question 5. This is great. Often that data is used to identify students or groups of students who need additional support. So instructionally, data is often used. And then I think these questions around COVID are really interesting at the back end. So on the one hand, for question number 9, if you're looking at that, COVID has disrupted our schools' ability to regularly use data in our schools. Plurality of people disagree or are neutral. So it sounds like people have continued to keep that data mindset even over the last couple of years where things have been challenging. But what I think is even more interesting is how COVID has changed the use of data. So 65% of people, 12% strongly agree, 65% agree that COVID has caused us to collect and use different types of data to make decisions. And I think that is a reflection of being agile and responding to change. So very interesting poll results here. Thank you for sharing. And I think it's going to lead well into sort of our topic for today as we continue to move forward, which is how do we continue to build a data culture in your building? And we know from research that when schools' policies and practices are informed by data, inequities and poor performance in education can be identified and remediated, that we can close achievement and opportunity gaps, and that there are certain data competencies that are essential for a school to cultivate that data culture. So we're going to talk about these 5 sort of areas or axes or dimensions of data culture, just so we can have a common definition. But then we're going to have the opportunity for you guys in small groups to talk about what this means in the context of your school. How does your school actually do each of these 5 dimensions? And just for your own resource, so you have something you can walk away from this call today with, you can find access to our data culture tips one-pager by clicking on the link here on this slide. So feel free to grab this one-pager and utilize it as a resource for your school. But just to go through these pieces right now, in terms of our 5 dimensions, and in terms of setting sort of a set definition for each of these, one of the things that's very important with setting the data culture in your school is to make sure that you have a data source identification process, that you know what you are trying to gather. And so identifying and evaluating the different types of sources of data that could be collected to answer specific questions in your school. Over the last couple of sessions here in the data working group, we've talked about how do we create these cycles of learning and how do we identify the data we want to collect to promote those cycles of learning. So this is really the first step. What are the things I need to identify as data sources to collect, and knowing that those data can be disaggregated by subgroups. We'll come back to this concept a lot, that data should not just be at the top level or overall, but that you can break this down and cross-cut it by other sort of subgroup data so that you can make evidence of growth, not just overall, but also for evidence of equity and comparability. The second dimension of having strong data cultures is the data collection process. So you've identified what you're collecting, but now we have to have a place to actually collect it and store it. So what are the points in which you're creating, what are the points in which you're collecting data throughout the year? For some of you, this may be driven by the requirements of reporting. You collect staff data at various points in the year. You're going to collect student assessment data throughout different points of the year if you're doing sort of your own local-based assessment. But what are the sort of cadence and calendar for data collection? Additionally, data collection could take the form of quantitative numbers, which can be stored easily in a database or easily pivoted, easily dissected. But you're also going to have qualitative data that you're going to collect. And what are the means by which you'll store your qualitative data? And do you have a data warehouse that can account for some of this more open-ended data that you are collecting? The third dimension is data review. When are you actually opening up that database, taking that information that you've stored and collected, and actually having a conversation around it among your staff, both at the leadership level, but also down to those who are the practitioners in the classroom? So reviewing data systematically, which means developing the protocols and the dialogue around how to interpret data to make inferences and decisions about next steps. School leaders are in a unique role where they can model how they want their teachers and how they want their staff members to use data in these sessions. So what should a conversation around around student assessment data look like? What should looking at data dashboards look like? And speaking of data dashboards, that takes us into our fourth dimension, which is about data visualization. What sort of platforms or systems do you currently have in your school that allows you to clean, sort, and make it possible for data to be publicly digested? And visualization can take a lot of time. It's important to think about who on your team has the tools to clean the data, to make it presentable and make it actionable. But also, how can you create platforms that allow staff to do their own visualization, so that you're not answering every question for them and handing them that Excel table, but is it open source or is it available so that it can be manipulated and visualized by staff members to get to the answers they want for the populations that they're of interest? So what are the data visualizations you use? Do you have a set number of dashboards? Are they easily sort of modular, or can you dig into them and pivot them, and change them around? What are those platforms and who can sort of manage that process? And then lastly, data analysis. So it's great that you have access and you've publicized and you've collected all this data, but you have to make sure that you have a process in place to answer the so what question. How do you make data actionable so that it leads to changes either in instruction or in the operations of your school? Consider ways that you can tease out the trends in the data through those visualizations, but that makes that an action-oriented process so that you can go ahead and implement changes, reforms, or solutions to see upticks in that data. So I know this is a whirlwind of these 5 dimensions, but I wanted to make sure we walked through these so that we can enter into a bit of a conversation with the group we have on with Paul today. We are going to do sort of a gallery walk activity. We're going to break you guys into 5 small groups. You'll be randomly assigned to other sort of practitioners, school leaders, data managers across the state. And what you'll do is with your team, first thing I'd ask you to do is introduce yourself. Share who you are, where you teach, or where you are a school leader or a data practitioner. And then we're going to do a virtual gallery walk. So in your group, in each of the groups, we will go ahead and have you join a Jamboard for about 3 to 4 minutes. So your path through the Jamboards are linked on the gallery walk routes, which is located on slide 14. So if everyone wants to join me on slide 14 of the presentation in the Google Doc, you can see the different pathways. When we break you into groups, we'll announce what group you're in, but you'll have about 3 to 4 minutes in your small groups to discuss ways in which your school is doing these different things, identifying its data sources, collecting its data, reviewing data, visualizing data, and data analysis. So you can click on any of these links and they'll take you to the proper Jamboard for that dimension. And we'll give you, as I said, about 4 minutes. You can add sticky notes by clicking on the sticky note tab over here and adding your comments. So sticky note around data source identification. We keep a master list of data that is to be collected throughout the year. And you can just go ahead and hit that save, and it will drop the sticky note onto the Jamboard. And as you guys gallery walk through the different Jamboards, you're going to go ahead and respond. You can respond to these post notes themselves by adding a check or a plus. If you like what is said here, you can add a check or various other sort of indicators onto the post-it notes. So I will get you guys set up in the breakout rooms in just a moment. I'm going to just check the chat because I think there's a couple things in the chat here. It looks like Kevin, thank you for doing that. Kevin, if you don't mind just creating the breakout rooms, we're going to want 5 of them, equally distributed. And then if you don't mind just saying who is in each of the groups, and you can just announce who's going to be in group 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'll change this to the numbers just so they aren't letters and it's clear. Do you mind doing that, Kevin?
Yeah, so room 1 is going to be Danielle, Jill, Marissa, Marnie, Teresa, and Yvette. Room 2 is going to be Janet, Leslie, Matthew, Sapand, and VJ. Room 3 is going to be Alan, Christian, Deborah, and Gary. Room 4 is going to be Anna, Jeremy, Richard, Tiffany, and Tracy. And room 5 is going to be Alfred, Dylan, Florian, Megan, and Phaedre.
Great. So once you're in your room, you'll go ahead and introduce yourselves. Make sure you introduce yourselves, and then you can begin the process of getting from the first destination on your path from your group. And feel free to add your sticky notes and post-it notes to the Jamboard. I will message the groups as you will continue to rotate. So just be aware that you'll receive a message in your breakout rooms once you need to rotate to the next stop on the gallery walk. Are there any questions before we open up the rooms? All right, go ahead, Kevin, please feel free to open up the breakout rooms. All right, thanks everyone for joining us for those small group conversations in the breakout rooms. I'm just going to share my screen and we'll get started. And then as soon as we've debriefed a little bit about the conversation in the breakout rooms, we do have a reporting update and announcement from State Ed. So please feel free to stay on the call until that. But just a few questions to debrief. Thinking about some of the conversations in your small group discussion, are there areas of data culture and data collection that you feel your school does best? Does anybody want to share some of the things that they do to promote that data culture? Or where they would like to improve?
I can speak to the area that I need to improve. So
Okay, thank you, Don.
Yeah, I'm just coming back from working in Tennessee, so still trying to get my feet under me with the New York schools. But in Tennessee, I think the biggest the biggest hurdle was often getting the humanities teachers to participate in some of the data conversations. I found that math teachers were a little bit more eager. Science teachers kind of grouped themselves in with that, STEM. But really getting the English teachers, especially, and oftentimes the lower grades English teachers, was where we got the most pushback on them feeling like a data conversation was or was not going to be useful for their practice. So, I think that's an area that I'd like to improve on, because if they're not identifying that the data conversation is useful for them, then I think it's my job as a data person to figure out how to better connect with them and to make that useful for their practice.
Thank you for that, sharing that reflection, that sort of discipline or department level difference when it comes to data. Do other people have reflections on that? I mean, this has been an interesting year as you guys have probably now back in person are trying to reset some of the protocols and expectations around use of data with your staff. I don't know if anybody has reflections on that process. I also know just anecdotally from talking to a lot of school leaders, there are a lot of new teachers who are in the profession this year. We've had a lot of transitions, a lot of change to staff. And so bringing new teachers on and getting them comfortable with data can be a challenge. I don't know if that is a reflection that anybody else on the call has as well.
No, I would, second that. I think one of the other issues just in staffing is not just new teachers from the beginning of the year, but it's changing in staffing throughout the year. So how can we, as far as, professional development, build in throughout the year that training to support the new teachers just getting into, developing an understanding of the data, and at the same time have another program for the more experienced or teachers who've been exposed to more data driven instruction, so that they can continue to grow professionally and utilize it, but they can also engage those newer teachers in those conversations and not lose them because they have more experience.
Do different schools either have set PD for training on that, or are there certain data days that happen during the school year where you can sort of dig into this? How do different schools sort of handle that piece, sort of bringing the staff together around data?
So, Michael, I can jump in, and I will say that I used to always feel like we were swimming in data, and I don't know how to swim. And over the last few years, we've done a really good job at sort of learning how to swim, and a lot of that has been through centering the work. Everybody has to be sort of own data and sort of have the language and everything, but having somebody at the center, and he's on the line, and I'm going to say Carl Eason, maybe he could come off and talk a little bit about what he does, really kind of helps us to get control of all the data, and I think make it so that we're not as overwhelmed by it, which then helps to push it out to folks through like PDs and that sort of stuff, and we do try to do that during PDs on a pretty, I think, fairly constant and ongoing basis. And Carl can speak to this more. I'm going to say it for the third time, so maybe he'll take the hit now.
Carl, I don't know if you'd like to add on to that. The cold call by Deborah over here.
Sure, definitely. I was voluntold. I'm happy to. Yeah, I think something that we do also, Alan, is we'll break off during our PDs into small groups, and I'll try to have a data, not like expert, but someone who's good with data be in each group, because it is hard. And with technology too and data, it's like you have to have 5 different levels of conversations to a big group at once, which is impossible. But laying out the framework of hey, here's what we have, and this is what we're all going to be doing. Let's go over it together, and then we're going to break off into groups, and this is what we're going to be looking at. And look really clear, hey, in this dashboard here, you can use this to find this data, and you'll be looking for X, Y, and Z. And then that kind of lets us circulate and make sure that all those different levels are kind of reached, because we have other people helping the ones who are lower. And then we all kind of just meet in the middle, if that provides any clarity.
Teresa, I see your hand is raised. Please feel free to join here. I believe you might be on mute still. Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, have utilized DataWise at the school I'm currently at, where we have teachers who are people on board who have been trained in the DataWise process. We have other people who have gone through the online training. There's like a 10-week thing that they can do. So, but we have regular DataWise meetings scheduled for our ELA and math teachers with those leaders with the, and they do one week ELA, 1 week math with those people doing those data conversations. So that is all scheduled out and planned. And over the summer, because the entire admin team at my building is new. So we are all participating in the full training, and then are going to have coaches with the DataWise next year. So and thank you, Cullen, for supporting that. But we are going to be really, like I always say, if we're going to be something, we have to really be it. So if we're going to be a DataWise school, we really have to use it. The one thing that they have not been doing is utilizing that process to look at the behaviors. Our behaviors is currently not really housed in a way that you can look at it that way. So we're looking at switching our school information system so we can utilize so that's part of it. So, but DataWise is what we're going to be using 100%.
I appreciate that. And it helps us, if there's value in sharing some of the context you have with DataWise, if they might be good for a presentation for a future data working group session. Teresa, feel free to shoot that information over to me. Maybe we can do that as a future working group topic, if they'd be open to that.
Sure.
Yeah, I think maybe some other schools might be interested in seeing what that platform looks like. And to that, I think that's the segue. Just if there are other topics around use of data that your school is either struggling with or would like to present on, or would like to know more about, feel free to shoot me a message in the chat or shoot me an email later on after this meeting. We're definitely looking to build out our scope and sequence for next year. And I think the more that we can generate topics that are of specific interest for those in this call and in this group, that'd be great. So I'm just going to throw my email in the chat. And with that, I am going to transition to the last part of our program just for the sake of time. But we are really honored and it's very special to have Tracy Davey from Eastern Suffolk BOCES with us today. She has a few announcements about data reporting that I'd like her to share. So I'm going to turn it over to Tracy right now, and then we'll close out with just a few remaining announcements. But Tracy, feel free to go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Are you seeing a screen that says Eastern Suffolk BOCES? And okay, great, thank you. So I asked Michael a few months back if I could have a few minutes on meetings to give a public service announcement to help, give you all an update on what items we know that you want to have on your radar because of deadlines. And so thank you, Michael, for making that happen. Again, I want to let you know I work at Eastern Suffolk BOCES with the 271 schools in New York City. So forgive me if I say something specific to the city charters. I know that there's a bunch across the state. And please remember, if I happen to say a specific date, you may want to check with your RIC, your Regional Information Center, who hosts your level 0 to make sure you meet their deadlines. So the fastest way to find information on the state's website, actually this works for any website and in any browser, is to type in the core part of a web address, nysed.gov. I hit a space, I tapped in IRS, and it brought me directly to the web page for the Information Reporting Service Office. So on this, I want to focus in on this particular part. In about June or somewhere between June and August, the IRS office puts out an annual memo for reporting and their timeline. And I want to dive into this because these two things, for me, they direct my work for the entire year. This is a view of the top of that timeline, and they provide you all sorts of dates. This is every time the timeline has been updated. They do it as they need to, as any federal reporting deadline may change, or when they have better information, they're going to give it to you. So I grabbed the 3 rows on this document that are in the near future, right? You definitely want to be looking at the information for your English language learners and make sure that those counts are accurate. I recommend going out to L2RPT, that's level 2 reporting of the data warehouse. So knowing what you have in your building and your local systems and what you see in level 0 doesn't always equal what's at state ed. So you really want to make sure you verify your data at state ed in their systems. The next part is huge. You may have gotten an email yesterday. The state has changed the deadline that was for this week for out of certification reporting, whereas you had to report course instructor assignment every class that your teachers were teaching, so that the state can complete work for the federal requirement to report out of certification. That deadline has changed. Now that course instructor information with student class entry, exit, and all of your staff assignments are due to state ed on May 13th. So that's Friday night. Your RIC is going to push that data up. Your regional information center, that RIC, RIC, they probably have a deadline, maybe Friday morning, maybe Thursday. In New York City, it's 9 a.m. on Wednesday, because we have to pass the data to the city, who submits it to state ed. So I want to now dive into this, because this was, if your school was hustling to make this deadline this week, you do have a little more time, but I wouldn't let up too much steam. In order to get, we at Eastern Suffolk BOCES in the city agree on target dates. We want the data in early so that the data gets to L2, to the state ed, and you can verify your information. But then we kind of have, you know, the drop dead date. When does it have to be in by? So for us, we're really targeting May 3rd, and we want it done. We need every last file on May 11th. I saw a hand pop up. Actually, I can open up the chat if you want to pop things in there. I'll try to respond as I go along. L program participation must be reported with a program fax. Yes, thank you, Janet. Currently, you can look into different state L2 RPT reports, and you will see your L counts. In June, though, I believe they kind of flip a switch. Your entire L reporting has to be complete. Not only do you have to know that which students were identified as being English language learners, you have to report the exact program service that they received. So it's possible that you have a student who is identified as an English language learner and they don't receive a service, then that's what you should report. Otherwise, maybe they're in a dual language course. There's another option I can't think of, and then there's an ESL class, the most typical one across the state. So thank you, Janet, for reminding me on that part. Okay, so back for the this out of certification reporting, you absolutely, actually in level 0, when you're pushing your data, I recommend that you are loading demographic and enrollment information every week. If you don't load it that often, then you're going to do it every other week or every month, whatever your own schedule is. But to complete all of this reporting, you must have these additional templates completed. Your staff snapshot, which you could, the state asked for it in the fall, but if you had updates, you should, make sure that you get them in there now. You have to tell them what courses you offer at your school. When do students earn a final grade in their classes? And then these 3 are really key. These are all prerequisite data. You need to have every class that teachers are teaching, all the classes that your students are taking. And then for all your non-teaching professionals, you need to have a staff assignment. Again, all corrections must be an L2 RPT for your RIC submission on Friday, May 13th. So make sure you know the deadline prior to that. I want to point out to you, there are data dependencies, right? Like you have to have certain templates in to report the data, but they also require, for certain reporting, there's a student and educator report at data.nycsa.gov. And for your count of teachers, because we've seen it at schools where many people have a teacher certification, and you might put that designation in the staff snapshot. But unless they actually have a course instructor assignment record that says, I'm teaching ELA 9 as of this date and for, that term of the year, then if I was a teacher at your school, I would not be included in that count unless I had a course instructor assignment record. So this is very important because, like I said, reported publicly at data.nycsa.gov will be the count of your teachers. And the state has requirements to report data to the federal government. Actually, almost everything they are collecting is really for the federal government, because it's all a part of that NYCSA program, that Every Student Succeeds Act, that says how schools will be rated for accountability and whatnot. And Janet mentioned there, in May, we're going to have a more detailed presentation about the end of year reporting. So what would happen if you miss this CIA deadline, or if you're just late with it, even if you do it before your data warehouse closes? The first problem would be that you would be excluded from the U.S. Department of Education out of certification reporting. And we hope you don't want to do that. We don't want to see you do that. The data would also not be reflected at data.nycsa.gov. So it's great to do full reporting and have everything there. It may also depend on whether or not your authorizers or any of that information is needed when you're, going into renewals or just, annual reports and whatnot. So there's also a risk, again, that even though in your staff snapshot, you might have teachers reported, that title is not enough. And so we need to make sure that that course instructor assignment data is being pushed out to your reporting. I know the meeting's scheduled to end at 11. If you have to leave, I surely appreciate that. Actually, I'm going to throw a quick in some links that of the information that I'm talking about here. I just have a few slides left. I'm showing you an image here of the staff qualifications and from data.nycsa.gov from the 1920 school year. Again, to be included here, teachers need a staff snapshot. They need a course instructor assignment. Your principals need a staff snapshot and a staff assignment, saying that, because it's a non-teaching title. This is from the student and educator report. This data that we're reporting, especially the class entry exit data, will be posted publicly. And all the information I'm showing you here are statewide results. The 1920 data hasn't been posted yet. So that's why I'm looking back at 1819. Actually, I don't think they had the 1920 because of COVID. I think that reporting kind of went sideways a little bit. So here they're going to say average class sizes. As you create course instructor assignment, you should have every section of every class that your teachers teach. If there's a second teacher in the room, like this particular section might have an ESL teacher, this is all fake data, I made it up this morning, and a special education teacher is in that same room, then that means for this class, there's one course instructor assignment. For this class, there's two. You have the core teacher, you have an ENL teacher. In course instructor assignment, you want to flag that ENL teacher as ENL and the special ed teacher as special ed in those rooms, because unless they're actually certified for the course being taught, whether it's biochemistry or whatever, if they're not actually certified for that exact class, but they're certified special education, they're going to look like they're out of cert. Looking at class sizes, right? So by reporting each section, how many students are in each section, then you're able, the state will report the average. If you built it out with a single period, it might look that at your school, ELA 9 has 121 students, and even the parents of yours or at your building would say, if they looked at their report, yeah, that's not true. Your board would know that's not true, but we don't want that, anything inaccurate to go out there. Also on that student and educator report are staff counts. And so it's important to have a staff assignment because reported publicly are the number of school counselors and social workers. This information started being reported publicly when ESSA came around because of the concern about school climates. Of course, then the count of teachers, these are staff who would have to have a course instructor assignment record, and then the count of principals. It is expected that the state is very interested in collecting also your librarians and your nurses. We found out that it was difficult for the state to be able to contact school nurses because they didn't actually have that data. So they want information about that too. Even like county health departments were looking for information. So whenever you hear L2, that's level 2 of the data warehouse. Level 0 is the ground floor where your school gets to put in information. Level 1 is your regional information center or the New York City Department of Education for the city charters. And then L2 is everything at the state level. They have multiple data systems and access points. And it's very, I really definitely want to highlight this. Thank you for sticking with me a few extra minutes here. I'm not giving you all of them. I'm highlighting here the ones that your regional information center probably will point you to at some point, depending on a question you may have. So there's that business portal on the state ed website. When your school reports, your principal and your superintendent or the charter leader, chief executive officer, they are automatically given access to this system. The charter leader will have access to over here what's called SEDAS. This is the state education department's data authorization system. They can open accounts for anyone who needs it to these other systems, to that business portal also. Actually, CEDREF is a public site. Here you can do a search, and we're going to look at this a little bit more. CEDREF actually stands for the State Education Department. RE is for reference and then file. It's basic information about your school. Cognos Analytics is your L2RPT. So again, if you want, you're reporting the CIA data, but you're going to go to L2RPT. And one of the links I just put in the chat for you is a video that I have for Eastern Suffolk BOCES. Dates just went, out the window in that video yesterday. So, but the information about how to verify those reports is accurate. And then of course that data gets posted at data.nycsa.gov. I recently heard that soon this website will be updated with information for the 2021 school year. The state works on that and releases data throughout the year. So here I'm drilling into CEDREF. I just did, because state ed's in Albany, why not look at Albany city schools, right? This is all public information. It gives you, address information. For a charter school, it would tell you who your authorizer, it would list your authorizer and when your school was first opened, whether or not you're like a special act school, or I think it has some information about grade levels. This interesting part here with the address, it actually shows your latitude and longitudinal, location on the globe. And then they have positions. They list here important positions at your school, so that when the state has information, new information, deadlines, or they want to show you some data to look at counts of information, when they can tap here, they can say, hit all chief executive officers, make sure all data coordinators get this announcement as soon as they do it. So just this week, actually last week, the state created a new title for this HR administrator. So if you are an HR administrator at your school, I suggest you update CEDREF so that you can be listed here. What happens again is whenever they have information, and it says here some teacher certification information, if the state is publishing something about how they're using course instructor assignment for certifications, they'll give that to you. This isn't the teach office, so that you're not going to get everything on certifications, but you will get some highlights. Of course, for staff snapshot and staff assignments, I crossed off here staff eval and staff tenure because that's not required for charter schools. At the business portal, again, they posted just yesterday a file regarding the counts of course instructor assignment, probably student class entry, and your staff assignments, staff snapshot. And at least your chief executive officer would have gotten an email yesterday and been prompted to go out to the portal, log in, and download a file. If you happen to have one of these data systems, I just had to throw it out there. All this reporting that we're, these 4 systems, the state, whenever they change a requirement, they meet with those software systems and they tell them, you have to do this, your clients need it soon. They'll tell them the date they need it. So I just want to let you know, if you don't know how to access those reports to make your end of the year reporting easy, go research it, find out who your guru is and talk to your vendor maybe. I've talked to people with Teacher Ease, Illuminate, I can't think of others right now, but most of them, I've even called their parent companies. Most of them have some place to download data in a CSV file, grab the pieces you need to make your reporting easier. And that's it, a word from our sponsors. I'm willing, would love to take any questions. I'm gonna have to go back and look. I'm not sure. I meant to give you a link. Yep, and the links that I sent you was how to update CEDREF. It's really just an email with your letterhead, your BEDS code, and letting state ed know when a new position is available. Actually, Janet and I were having a conversation yesterday. If your school's BEDS code changed, you'll be able to see the history of BEDS codes in CEDREF, and there are ways to make sure that you could always access that data from a prior BEDS code. Chat with your regional information center to get more information on that.
All right, well, thank you so much, Tracy. I apologize for giving you sort of this rush period at the end, but you went through so much great information. We will be posting all this information, the PowerPoints and the links into our resource center. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop the resource center link so that people can have access to that. And you can find it in our data working group room. But thank you for joining us for today. We have one more session for the year, which is in May, and we're actually going to have Tracy and Janet and Jeff Schaefer from IRS join us on that final session, which will be all about end of year reporting. So it'll be a much more tutorial session. But we wish you guys the opportunity to come and hear a little bit more about these reporting requirements toward the end of the school year. So please join us at our next session. You should have the calendar invite if you registered for this session. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving us 10 more minutes of your time. If you have other questions, always feel free to email me and the association, and we can provide assistance or direct you to the right person to answer your questions. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. The link to the data center, the data room in our resource center is in the chat. Feel free to join that, and I will post all these resources after the meeting. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
Michael, I'll add quick annotated notes and email this to you shortly.
Thank you so much.
Yep.